right, no problems. Well, my name's Matt. I'm from Techne Architects, and yeah, last up for the day, I'll be presenting 99 Rowena Parade House. So I'll just get stuck into it. So the clients of Rowena Parade House engaged us to craft a contemporary home out of an existing 1900s Edwardian house. Rowena Parade is situated in the heart of Richmond, just a short distance away from Swan Street, the CBD and the Melbourne Sporting Precinct. The site itself is oriented north to south and is flanked by two similar Victorian-era homes. To the south and rear, a bluestone laneway abuts the property and acts as a thoroughfare for pedestrians. A large neighbouring planting of deciduous trees provide the rear of the site with protection from the harsh western sun. As you can see at the rear of the site, it's pretty raw, it's pretty gritty and urban. And conversely, to the Rowena Street side, it's lined with Victorian-era homes. It's ornate and quite the opposite in that it's suburban. During our initial site visit, some key characteristics really stood out, and they were the textures of the surrounds, the forms and edges of the architecture, how embedded it felt within the neighbourhood, and the fineness of the Victorian-era architecture. From a planning point of view, it was important to maintain the streetscape of Rowena Parade. Thus, any contemporary extension was to be set back to maintain that. Really important. Sure.
Hey, Rowan. I'm just trying to get him to mute because I want to concentrate. Can you mute yourself? Because we just hear all your background noise and that's distracting. Good, thank you. All right, now I feel like I can concentrate. So just no problem if we're going a little bit longer. Yeah.
So I was saying, yeah, the site itself, the area is quite a significant area for Victorian heritage homes. It's one of the oldest in Victoria to have these particular type of architecture in the area. So again, to maintain that street frontage was of utmost importance. The client's brief was to create a contemporary family home which was big enough for entertaining guests, children and their grandchildren. They really wanted to retain the larger extent of the existing house. They wanted a north-facing and west-facing garden which could open up to the rear laneway, a self-contained studio, a south-facing master bedroom with a balcony, kitchen, living and dining areas which could spill out into this courtyard, and a non-intrusive garage accessible from the laneway. We explored the various spatial relationships and decided that the laneway garden option on the right best suited the site and, more importantly, the client's needs. So as you can see, we sort of identified what we really wanted to keep, and that was the existing roof. We tried to maintain that as best as possible, and we've demolished the rear garage and lean-to structure. We then sited the building to the east to open up the west for the courtyard space, and then shifted the upper form to allow for a cantilevered edge and site setback to the east. We then looked at carving out these balconies to the first floor and punching through windows to allow views in and views out to the laneway and to the South Yarra skyline beyond. The early intent was obviously to create this open feeling living space which could spill out into this courtyard. It could be filled with an abundance of greenery and not only have views across the courtyard but down from above. During the DD process, the design was tweaked to mitigate the amount of the existing house that was to be demolished. A key design driver became the floating pavilion, which hovered above the heavy ground floor base. To emphasise this weightlessness, the first floor massing is offset and cantilevers over that ground floor, creating a covered walkway below. And through the use of a light-coloured palette and to the external walls, window frames and balustrades, that juxtaposition is further enhanced. So this is the plan that we landed on, and the challenge was to simultaneously celebrate the heritage aspects of the building whilst introducing urban materials, textures and elements. The client's desire to live, work and entertain within the same zone was a key driver, in transforming the enclosed traditional floor plan into a light-filled open home. And moreover, the clients wish to incorporate landscaping and textures which would visually straddle the boundary between internal and external. Concrete, steel and brick all were a subtle nod to the raw and unadorned historic setting. The entry foyer, number 2, has been retained and stretched to provide a grand sense of arrival. To the south lies 2 existing bedrooms which have carefully been restored and converted to guest bedrooms and a sitting room, whilst the existing living room has been altered to create a new study. Through the transition of materials from the entry foyer to the living room, there's a clear delineation between the old and the new. And to offset the inherent and raw nature of the polished concrete floor, warmth was added through the use of a timber batten-lined ceiling. The centrepiece of the space we find is the kitchen and the refined combination of timber, marble, stainless steel and polished concrete. With the ground floor dedicated to the shared living space, the first floor has been devoted to a master bedroom and studio, each with their own private balcony overlooking the courtyard below. A number of those deciduous trees that we spoke about earlier to the adjacent alleyway create the perfect opportunity for dappled light and shadow to stream across the rendered western facade and courtyard. And the strategically placed floor-to-ceiling first-floor windows not only allow glimpses of the neighbouring tree canopy, but also provide a vignette to the laneway below. That's the south elevation and west elevation from the laneway and Rowena Parade. And the short section and long section showing that cantilevering first floor mass and the sloping site. During construction, it was a relatively straightforward demolition. There were some odd latent conditions and we identified some precarious structure which we were able to resolve on site. The slab showing the accommodation of the sloping site and piers along that eastern boundary wall to support the neighbouring wall from collapsing, which was another fun latent condition, expensive as well. And the framing progress, showing that open feeling of the design taking shape. We also utilised that offset of the upper floor to allow for the installation of skylights along the eastern boundary to allow light to penetrate into those deeper, darker areas. And restoring the heritage elements were of utmost importance as well. So the front porch was all rotten out, plasters cracked, cornices were damaged, and the front windows were all damaged and broken. So it became a delicate balancing act between replacing everything and assessing what could be salvaged and restored to minimise costs. And during the later stages of the build, it was great to see the intent of that dancing light across the floors and the joinery really come to fruition. So the final shots, that's the landscaped entry with the restored facade, concealing that extension beyond to the rear. And on the right is the bedroom restored to its former glory. We really did like a light touch on these spaces, new paint finishes and repaired the plaster and furnishings. The courtyard, demonstrating that intent of the split form from the light form which overhangs the darker base, and also a shot through the master bedroom, which uses the neighbourhood character as a backdrop. Okay, 2 seconds. The floor-to-ceiling windows which frame the views outwards on the upper floor, and private balcony. Oh, sorry, wrong way. And the internal living space. So this is the living room, dining and kitchen area with a timber ceiling which added warmth to the raw palette of materials. The client also really wanted some steel frame windows as a bit of a touch to the industrial space, and that was something that the client was really interested in. From a design perspective, the kitchen, the centrepiece, of the space is the kitchen, but more importantly, it's the heart of the home. This was a really big deal for the client, as they really wanted a place where they can gather, have meals formally or informally, share stories, and come together at the end of the day. So all in all, Rowena Parade was a house designed for clients who were eager to create a private sanctuary within a fast-paced and rapidly changing inner city suburb. And instead of closing itself off, the house welcomes pedestrians to peek through and vice versa. a house for entertaining all year round with a strong connection to the outdoors as well as the existing heritage architecture. Thanks.